Well, the Uganda's army, UPDF, has been accused of cross-border attacks against the South Sudanese People Defense Forces. Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you what exactly happened at Kajukeji County, as well as I'm going to tell you why these skirmishes keep happening in that particular locality and what the Uganda's People Defense Forces has said regarding this particular attack. Also, the point of view from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces and the authority of Kajukeji County. Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on the South Sudanese crisis, you get notified as soon as possible. Well, recently we've been talking about the South Sudanese People Defense Forces being assisted by the Uganda's People Defense Forces in fighting opposition forces in South Sudan. But yesterday, a different kind of communique was released by the authorities in South Sudan. The press secretary in the commissioner's office, Isaac Wori, released information that there was an incident that occurred around 3 p.m. and involved an exchange of fire between suspected Ugandan troops and local joint operations units that were stationed in the area. That means that the UPDF engaged the South Sudanese Defense Forces and other authorities that were in the area in a shootout in the border between Uganda and South Sudan. This particular incursion took place in the Nyangamuda area in Kangapotu Payam, near Fitinambaya village, during an intended cross-border community meeting. There was supposed to be a cross-border meeting between communities of Uganda and communities of South Sudan to perhaps come together and reason together because of the skirmishes that keep happening in north of Uganda and south of South Sudan between the communities that has led to a situation of tension within the area. So these particular incidents between the Uganda's People Defense Forces and the South Sudanese People Defense Forces disrupted that particular meeting that was supposed to be held by the local leaders from both sides. Well, the authorities in South Sudan are still investigating into this matter, as so far no casualties or damages have been released by the South Sudanese authority regarding this particular attack. But it is important to note that this is not the first time that these kind of skirmishes have happened in this locality. This area has a history of border disputes and incidences involving the UPDF patrols, including prior allegations of looting, cross-border attacks, and violence affecting civilians. Both parties, be it the South Sudanese People Defense Forces and the Uganda's People Defense Forces, have been engaging each other frequently in these areas. And the reason why this has been happening is because of the serious border issues that exist in this area. Because the border between Uganda and South Sudan are poorly demarcated, mostly in villages where there is no fine line between which area belongs to Uganda or to what extent you are in South Sudan. Therefore, when patrols are taking place in these areas, sometimes the troops of either country can find themselves very deeply into another country's territory, and that causes skirmishes now and then because the Uganda's People Defense Forces will retaliate if they find that the South Sudanese People Defense Forces have been so much into their country, and this is the same kind of a reception that the South Sudanese People Defense Forces will give the Uganda's People Defense Forces if they find them so much into their country. And it is not the demarcation alone that is the problem, because this area in Kajukeji along the borders has very serious ethnic issues when it comes to land and grazing. Most of the communities there are pastoralists. That means that they need land for grazing their cattle. Sometimes the greener pastures are on either side of the border, and these communities will take their cattle on the greener pastures, perhaps deeper into another country's territory, and that will always cause conflict between these communities. And perhaps that is the reason as to why these elders were to meet to discuss on how to solve these issues, this conflict between each other in terms of land and grazing area in this border region. And just like any other border, there are criminal activities that happen within these regions. And both of the authorities of Uganda and South Sudan take initiative to fight the rebels and to fight smuggling that happens within these borders. Sometimes these authorities overlap each other in terms of patrol to safeguard the border or to try and chase the smugglers or criminals within these areas. That is the reason as to why sometimes these events happen, because we don't have a definitive answer yet as to why there was a shootout between the UPDF and the South Sudanese People Defense Forces. These are the reasons, the likely reason as to why there was that event where the South Sudanese People Defense Forces and the Uganda's People Defense Forces engaged in crossfires at the borders within South Sudan. These past incidences have also caused an environment of mistrust between these two countries. And therefore, when one UPDF soldier is found deep within South Sudan, therefore the South Sudanese Defense Forces will retaliate harshly against that UPDF soldier, and that is the same kind of a reception because of the mistrust and the past events that have happened between these two authorities. Therefore, these are the reasons perhaps that played out just a few hours ago when there was that shootout between the UPDF and the South Sudanese Defense Forces. Well, what does this mean? Of course, this time it is Uganda that was inside South Sudan, meaning that it is the Uganda Defense Forces that was on the wrong this time. And the allegations that have been put out by the authorities in South Sudan are very serious against Uganda, because that will be demeaning the sovereignty of South Sudan, because they went there forcefully and then they engaged in crossfires against the South Sudanese Defense Forces. So those are two violations, very serious violations that the South Sudanese Authority is making against the Uganda's Defense Forces. Also, the timing was telling, because this happened just when there was supposed to be that meeting between elders to discuss about the situation, the skirmishes that happened within this region. Therefore, one can deduce that this was in perhaps linking to that particular meeting that was supposed to happen. Perhaps a party did not want that particular meeting to happen or something of the sort. And that now will risk escalating diplomatic and security tensions between the Uganda's Defense Forces and the South Sudanese Defense Forces in that particular region, north of Uganda and south of South Sudan. Well, the situation is still fluid and it is not confirmed who actually fired first. Is it the UPDF or the South Sudanese Defense Forces? But what has been confirmed is that there was exchange of fire. Well, I will continue to keep you informed of the latest of what will come out from that particular incident between the UPDF and South Sudanese Defense Forces. Keep it bona fide.